Ed, are you bringing more chairs?
No.
No? Okay.
Good, Max.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry about the chair situation, but good afternoon, everyone, and a big, warm welcome from the Carmel Residents Association. We're so pleased to have this wonderful turnout, and we appreciate you being here. The CRA, yes, that's right. The CRA's contributions this year to the city's centennial celebration are two. One is our centennial book, Stories of Old Carmel, which is available right now today at the north end of the room, and it's being sold by Pilgrim's Way Bookstore. So we please encourage you to buy gifts, Valentine's Day gifts, gifts for family birthdays, anniversaries, whatever. And our other project was, of course, our centennial series. Jack Galante generously offered to bring his Galante red, and when his wife Dawn arrived today, she said, "No white?" So Dawn's dream, white wines, are being offered along with Jack's reds. So Jack and Dawn, thank you. So we will ask that you stay after the program and enjoy a glass of wine for a little social hour. Those of you in the room who are not yet members of the CRA and live in Carmel or its sphere of influence are encouraged to pick up a membership application, a newsletter, and a flyer all about us at the wine table. I have some reminders for CRA members. On February 17th, we will have our CRA for members only done really well. She doesn't let me miss a thing. And now, of course, what we've all been waiting for is to hear the irrepressible Jack Galante talk about his great-grandfather, Frank Devendorf, who we like to think of as the father of Carmel. And so, Jack, please, I want to tell you, Jack, when we planned these series of events, there were two people I especially wanted to speak to us, and one was Jack, and the other was Aaron Gaffel. I think it's so important to hear about the founders of Carmel, Frank Powers and Frank Devendorf. So I am so grateful to you, Jack, for opening up our series with such a bang. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Good.
Can you see, honey?
Yeah, I can.
You have a little light, too.
Yeah, no, I can see great. Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks, Barbara. Thanks, everybody, for having me. See, I got to start with drinking wine before all of you. I got an excuse because it's good for the throat, right? But it reminds me when I always like to drink a little wine before a presentation, but it reminds me of that joke. There was a new preacher and a new priest, and he was just kind of studying to be a full priest, and the father of the church said, "Well, why don't you give the sermon next Saturday?" And he was next Friday. He was very, very nervous, and he was, he asked the father. He said, "Well, I'm really nervous about this. What can I do to calm myself?" And he said, "Well," the father, Irish Catholic, and he said, "Well, I usually just take a little wine and take a little nip, and that really helps calm my nerves." And so the priest took that to heart, and he said, "Okay, that sounds great." And so he had his little wine and all that, and he gave the sermon. And after the sermon, he asked the father, he said, "Well, how did I do?" And the father said, "Well, my son, you was very enthusiastic, I'll put it that way, but I got to tell you a few things." He said, "First of all, there's 10 commandments, not 12. Second of all, there's 12 disciples, not 10. He said, Jesus was consecrated, not constipated." And he said, Jacob wagered his donkey, he didn't bet his ass. And he said, and David slew Goliath, he didn't kick the crap out of him. And let me tell you, please never refer to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost as Big Daddy Jr. and the Spook. So in any event, well, we're here to talk about James Frank Devendorf, the man in his vision. Don't want to forget my little slide clicker here. And I want to first thank you all very much for the invitation to talk to you today about my great-grandfather, James Franklin Devendorf. When Barbara asked me to talk about the father of Carmel, my initial reaction was, I can make pretty good wine, but I'm not a great historian. In fact, I'm a geographer by education. However, thankfully my mother, Jane Galante, was a true historian with a wealth of knowledge about Carmel and her grandfather. In 2006, she gave a talk to the Carmel Library on the founding of Carmel. So I thought it would be a great dedication to her to recreate her presentation and use her speech as the foundation of my talk. My mom spent years of her life collecting volumes of memorabilia, including correspondence, original deeds, photographs, stock certificates, and maps regarding the early days of the Carmel Development Company, which was formed by my great-grandfather and Frank Powers. With the dedicated assistance of Sarah Burling, this work was organized and cataloged. The culmination of their work can be found in a massive collection of documents and photographs that our family donated to the Carmel Library so this history would be preserved in perpetuity. I also feel well equipped to talk to you today as a geographer, since geography plays such an important role in my great-grandfather's journey. I'm especially grateful to this invitation to speak because in digging through my mom's files and records, I feel that I have been able to learn even more about my family's past and become even closer to my ancestors. When we talk about the history of Carmel, there's a considerable amount of publicly available lore, a collection of stories, some true and some fictitious, or at least highly embroidered, that pop out in print from time to time and include accounts of the Devendorf presence in Carmel. I'm going to recount a few more stories that, according to my mom, were family favorites. Perhaps, as with most good stories, even these have been embellished with each retelling. I found that in telling stories to someone, it brings them to life in a way that purely facts are rarely able to do. So, what I'm going to speak about today is based on several sources, but they all stem from the same diligent and comprehensive research my mother did over many, many years. This material comes from printed resources, such as genealogy charts, letters, and other documents, as well as stories that were passed down mainly from my grandmother, Lillian, who was Frank Devendorf's third living daughter. A few of the stories my mother retells are from recollections of her grandfather himself. She was 10 years old when he died, so she had some vivid recollections of him from the last years of his life. To understand the founding of Carmel, it seems that the main questions one would pose would be, what brought James Franklin Devendorf to Carmel in the first place? What made him develop the town in such a unique way? And what kind of life did he lead apart from his preoccupation with this town? I'm going to start with his background because I'm sure it's similar to that of some of your own forebears. It is typical of that westward movement that took immigrants from the Old World first to the eastern seacoast, then to the Midwest, and finally to the shores of the Pacific. My great-grandfather always said he came from a Pennsylvania Dutch background. This was most likely not Dutch at all, but Deutsch, which referred to the group of Germans who lived in the lower Rhine River, just before it enters Holland. After the family came to America, the name is listed on genealogical charts as Diefendorf. Probably in German, it was Tiefendorf, which means lower village. My mother's tracings of the immediate family line in the United States went back to Fallsburg, Michigan, in the middle to late 19th century. Thomas Jefferson Devendorf and his wife Grace Congdon had 3 children. One daughter died in infancy. Another daughter, Ida, was born in 1853, and a son, James Franklin, or Frank, was born on April 6, 1856. When Frank was 4, his father was killed in an accident. The terse account of his death says killed by a car, but at that date, it was certainly not an automobile, so it's unclear as to what kind of car it was, perhaps a railroad car. There's no record as to what kind of work Thomas did, but his parents lived on a farm near Lowell, Michigan. And it was there that young Frank spent the better part of his childhood. Records show that he was there until age 14, or 1870, After that, there's no record of his activities until 1874, when, at the age of 18, he arrived in San Jose, California. Two stories emerge from his childhood years. One of them is a delightful tale of a slightly naughty but very endearing little boy who was attending a one-room schoolhouse in rural Michigan. It seems that whenever a schoolboy misbehaved, he was sent outside into the nearby woods to cut a small switch from a tree that the teacher would then apply to his backside. But when Frankie Devendorf was sent out after committing some misdemeanor, he cut down a small tree and dragged it back into the classroom. Apparently, this feat was greeted with so much hilarity that the teacher joined in laughter and his California on the outskirts of San Jose, and he planted many non-native trees and bushes to beautify the city. A 1956 issue of the magazine Western North America refers to a tree planted by Jones of Aram as being, quote, the oldest known eucalyptus tree in Western North America, unquote. I mention this because it is certain that his stepfather's interest in protecting and enhancing the environment must have been a strong influence on Frank when he planted the trees down Ocean Avenue and made the rules about preserving the trees in Carmel. The earliest letter from Frank that my mother found was dated May 1877, written from Prescott, Arizona, and sent to the young lady with whom he had fallen in love, Lily Potter, my great-grandmother. He informs her that he is still not entirely well and is forcing himself to stay outdoors. His interest in real estate has already begun because he writes, quote, if I stay here, I will purchase a lot in some nice location for our home. Lily must not have been particularly delighted with the prospect of moving to Arizona. At the time, she was about to enroll in the music program at the newly founded College of the Pacific in Santa Clara. Lily subsequently entered the first class that accepted women. As an aside, the college later moved to Stockton, where its conservatory is still very distinguished. And much later, I also attended the University of the Pacific, and our family donated the organ in the chapel in honor of my great-grandmother. Getting back to the story, Frank was very much in love with Lily. A letter from 21-year-old Frank to 18-year-old Lily shows that their plans for the future, their future life, had already been made. Quote, my dear Lily, I have just finished the perusal of your previous letter. Words cannot express the joy that I experience on the receipt of a letter from you. I do not expect anyone to be surprised at the feeling expressed above, for what else could be expected when all the love that my nature is capable of is centered on you. All my hopes for happiness in the future depend on you, and sometimes I think that my hopes of heaven depend on having my idol Lily